Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Debbie Guy-Geesh. I'm a partner at the Pedowitz Group, and I'd like to welcome you to my 30-minute presentation entitled 3 Savage Takeaways from a TikTok Addict, that's me, and how you can use them to level up your 2021 revenue strategy. Now, if you're not a TikTok addict, you're probably scratching your head thinking, what is she talking about? What is it about a 15-second piece of video that's user-generated that I can see on an app that would remotely inform me about my revenue strategy in 2021? At the same time, I hope that all of my TikTok addicts who are listening already begin to get it, that what you have experienced from TikTok does indeed give you some really great lessons that you can apply to being a salesperson or a marketing person. But let me begin with asking you guys a question and telling you a story. And my question is, where were you last March? I think a lot of us felt like that was the time in which we entered Jumanji land. I think it's the time that we all felt like we were entering into an alternate universe. All of a sudden, it was a different game. We didn't know the rules. We didn't know how to engage. We had new roles to play. And I think a lot of us were just kind of stumbling around, just trying to figure everything out. I was actually working at a customer location in March with some team members from the Pedowitz group. And we'd been on site for about 2 weeks, and then we had about 2 more weeks to go. We show up to the office one morning, and it's like someone had kicked an ant bed. People are scurrying all over the place. Their receptionist, who is one of the coolest, calmest, most collected people I know, she was screaming on the phone. At the same time, she's trying to tell some people down the hall where to go and what to do. People were just scurrying all over the place. And what was happening was, like a lot of companies, they were shutting down operations and they were sending everybody home to work. And that really began the quarantine. And, for a lot of people, they struggled during the quarantine period for lots of different reasons. I was accustomed to go, 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 hair on fire, traveling all the time. And then all of a sudden, nothing. Like many of us, I turned to my phone for some stress relief and some entertainment. But how many books can you read? How many conversations can you have? How many games can you play before you're like, I'm bored out of my mind? So at about that time, I was having a conversation with my daughter. She's an adult. And she was telling me, Mom, you need to go check out TikTok. It's just so entertaining. And for me, it's just complete stress relief. I didn't quite understand what she was talking about when she said TikTok, but I said, I'll go try it out. So I think the first time I tried it, I was probably on for close to 3 hours. It was totally addicting. And it's addicting for me because there are so many stories of inspiration. There's so many stories of authenticity. And again, I'll share some of those things through the 3 lessons learned. But there was some good things and there were some bad things about TikTok. The bad things were, indeed, it was addictive. And I would say to myself, I'm going to take a break, or I go to bed at 11 o'clock and let me just check out a few TikToks. And 2 hours later, I'm still smiling and laughing. But the really great thing about TikTok was, for me, again, it was very, very inspirational. It gave me a new way to think. It provided very informative, effective content in this new format. And so it really helped me get out of a rut. And I think all of us, we just fall into doing the same thing the same way, and you can't do that. You need something that's going to expand your thinking. You need exposure to new things because they affect everything that you do in your life. And so from my experience with TikTok, I really have 3 savage lessons that I'm going to talk about today. The first is, what you think doesn't matter. The second is, boredom is a secret weapon. And number 3 is, get authentic or prepare to lose. So Let's go to the first lesson, shall we? Now, this one's called What You Think Doesn't Matter, because what really matters is action. And one of the things that I love about TikTok are the stories of inspiration of people who transformed themselves. I met a lot of artists on TikTok, for example. And at the beginning of the pandemic, these were people who had 9-to-5 jobs and they did their art at night, just kind of as a side thing. They were passionate about that art, yet could not really give up that full-time job. And so what happened in the pandemic is when they lost their jobs, they really saw it as an opportunity. So when they first lost their jobs, of course, the reaction was, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay the bills? But very soon after that, they began to recognize that perhaps this is the opportunity that they needed. And once they recognized this downtime as that opportunity, they began to reimagine what their life could be about. They really just didn't have time to do that before when they were working a 9-to-5 job. They reimagined, what if I was a full-time artist? What would that look like? How would it change my life? Is this the kind of life that I would like to live? And many of them actually reactivated how they lived and now have very, very successful businesses based on their art. So it's these stories of inspiration where people went from talking about and thinking about doing something to actually doing something. In parallel to that, earlier this year, I had created this thing called the Marketing and Sales Crisis Response Model. And it was in taking a look at the pandemic and how marketing and sales was responding to it. And like those TikTok artists who transformed themselves, who went from thinking about something to actually taking action, this is that kind of model. So I think for all of us, when this first started happening, whether you're in sales or whether you're in marketing, it's very natural when everything first started was just to react. And it's a very human thing to do and to be very worried. When I was at that company in Boston and they told everybody to go home, people are thinking, what does this mean for me? I mean, how am I going to work from home? Is my job at risk? How am I going to, homeschool the kids and try to work from home at the same time, So that initial reaction, again, was a very natural response. But after things had time to settle a bit, I think a lot of sales and marketing professionals began to recognize that, hey, things are changing a lot. And so maybe I can take this opportunity to do something different. But the recognition stage is incredibly important because in that recognition stage, we have to think about our employees, we have to think about our customers, and we also have to think about the company. For employees, recognizing that business as usual was gone forever. And this was a really, really hard thing to do. And so just, being authentic with your employees and being transparent and being honest during that stage, I think is very important. For your customers, they could no longer do business the way they wanted to do. If you were a salesperson and you did business based on dinners and meetings and face-to-face meetings, you just simply could not do those anymore. So it was a big change for customers too that they had to recognize. And then I think also for the company itself, think about the companies that had to retool overnight because everybody was working from home. So big, big, big recognition. But I think the number one recognition for everybody is that because of the pandemic and all the changes that it has brought, there's a recognition that business as usual will not return. Business as usual is gone, and based on the fact that we're never going to go back 100% to the way it was before the pandemic, it's time to move forward. And the way that you really move forward is through reimagining what it means to be a salesperson and reimagine what it means to be a marketer. This is an incredible opportunity for both sides of the organization. And so I do want to talk about that for a minute. When it comes to reimagine, a lot of it is coming through trial by fire. But as you look at 2021, you can't go back to business as usual. You know, just take a look at some of the stats and the studies that have been done on new consumer behavior. We're spending 50 to 70% more screen time. Those face-to-face meetings are not happening. So what happens to the early stages of the sales cycle? If the salespeople aren't meeting them face-to-face and people are spending 50 to 70% more screen time, then really it falls upon marketing to create those digital relationships and to be more forward in that sales process. We're seeing that customers want more customer experience and they're placing a high priority on digital because, again, they don't want to go out. And of course, face-to-face selling time has dropped dramatically. So when you think about all these things that aren't going to change, they're not going to go back 100% to the way they were before, it's really time to reimagine. It's really time to think about a new normal, or I like the phrase next normal even better. And this is a new direction. It's a new set of metrics. It's a new set of responsibilities. You know, what you did as sales, what you did as marketing, and how your company will impact revenue needs to be reimagined. And then once you've reimagined it, it's time to reactivate. And again, the reactivation is really the execution process. And again, when I think back to some of the TikTok artists that I began to follow, this is exactly what they went through. Lost their job, they reacted. They recognized that they have an opportunity to follow their passion. They reimagined what their life would be like, and they absolutely reactivated. So again, as a sales and marketing professional, you know, those are things that we all have to contend with. But when I take a look at it, I see the glass is half full. It's not half empty. And so I think that is one of my key takeaways for you. The lesson number one is, based on all these stories of transformation, it's what you do that counts. It is not what you think. And I think many of you have the tools for this kind of transformation, and maybe you just need a little push in the right direction. And so again, this will be prevalent for 2021, because those revenue strategies for 2021, they are not going to be the same ones that you had for 2020, and they are not going to be the same ones you had for 2019. So as sales and marketing works together for that revenue strategy, remember, it's not what you think, it is actually what you do, and you have to put this into action. Let's take a look at my TikTok Savage lesson number 2. I really like this one a lot. And I call this one, Boredom is a Secret Weapon. And honestly, how many of you listening to this talk at some point during the pandemic have been bored out of your minds? There's only so much TV you can watch. You know, there's only so many other things that you can do. It's one of the reasons I turned to TikTok as a new form of entertainment, because I was just bored out of my mind. And a lot of other people thought like I did. Viewership for TikTok in 2019 was around 800 million. It's projected to be over 1 billion by the end of 2020. And that's in terms of the content providers. And again, part of it is that the content, all the user-generated content, is widely varied, and it's incredibly creative, and it's incredibly innovative as well. That creativity and that innovation is something that makes TikTok endlessly interesting to watch. And I think that many of the people who generated content for TikTok, these were all people that were in quarantine, and they were like you and I, and they were bored out of their minds. So from boredom came this wealth, this tsunami of creativity and innovation. And even beyond TikTok, I predict that new businesses, new business models are going to be spun up in 2021 from this downtime and this boredom period that occurred in 2020. Now, let me tell you a little bit about boredom, because I want you to know what it is and what it isn't. I'm just going to read this to you. Boredom is more than just not doing anything. It's that annoying feeling that you want to do something satisfying, but you have nothing satisfying to do at the moment. This annoying feeling means your brain is working and it doesn't have anything pressing or immediate to work on. So it's free to think about things like new ways to do things or solve problems that you had not considered before. So when you're bored, your brain is still working. Now, how do we know that boredom leads to creativity and innovation besides me talking about TikTok? Study after study after study. So the first study I want to tell you about actually occurred in the 70s. So we've known this connection for quite some time. And what they did was they gave these participants some problem solving and word association to do, but they gave them way too much time to do it. And as a result, to fill the void and to avoid the boredom, they first gave out, of course, all the obvious answers, but then they gave more and more creative and out-of-the-box answers the more bored they got and the longer that they sat there. Another study was done around asking people to give creative uses for an ordinary household object. I love this one. And what they found was that people who did a boring task before this creative exercise gave more creative answers than people who did not do a boring exercise before this one on creativity. There's something about boredom that clears the mind so that you can think more clearly and more creatively about things. I found that study fascinating. And here's one that's near and dear to all of our hearts. In parallel, there was a more recent study done that showed the time frame for the way people's attention shifts from online to offline activities while they're working. That time frame has moved from 3 minutes to 45 seconds. I think it's even probably lower than 45 seconds right now. In addition, if the individual does not get enough interruptions during the workday, they begin to self-interrupt in order to maintain the level of stimulation, even if it brings on additional stress. This is why downtime is so necessary to clear the mind. You know, I've worked in the technology field and I've been in sales and I've been in marketing, again, my entire professional career. And, you know, the days of us running around with our hair on fire and thinking that are normal should be over. It is absolutely the opposite. A few years ago, a good friend of mine who was the CEO of a startup company, a very well-known startup company that most of you would know, he and I met at his offices in Colorado, and I said, "What is different about you?" And he says, "Well, I've started meditating." And he had just come back from a 3-day meditation retreat. And he told me, he said, "You know, I used to think that if my hair was not on fire, I wasn't doing my job. And the stress was absolutely killing me. So I can't live like that anymore." And I think that is really one of the lessons from TikTok. Number one, we're worse when our hair is on fire. We're worse when we're overloaded and overstressed. We are better when we have downtime and when we have boredom. So my TikTok Savage lesson number 2 to all of you is, based on enjoying and consuming this incredibly creative and innovative content produced through boredom, you need to find a way to make boredom and downtime part of your work world. The hair on fire world of sales and marketing is counterproductive. And one of the things that we see as we move into 21 is doing fewer things, but doing those things better. In a lot of cases, you know, what we need to do is becoming much more clear. And so again, running around with your hair on fire is counterproductive. You simply will not be at your best. Now, let's get to my final TikTok lesson, which I really like a lot. It's called Get Authentic or Prepare to Lose. There have been a number of studies that have come out about the impact of the pandemic on marketing and on sales and on those relationships with customers. And one of the studies was very clear that customers during this time want to do business with companies that they respect and also that they trust. And when I think about TikTok, one of the things that has really, really impressed me is the authenticity. Not everybody's authentic, but a lot of people are very, very authentic. And they come to TikTok not as, you know, having something that's overly produced or overly orchestrated, but just sharing. And they're being very authentic about that. And again, they don't over orchestrate. They don't, play. They just do it. They just say, here I am. Here's me. And I think this authenticity is part of the success of TikTok, because it's just people being people. And we can see ourselves in these people versus working with a talking head that just talks corporate gobbledygook. And so I think that authenticity has really been important. So again, back to the research on customers, their expectations and their behaviors really has changed. And from a marketing standpoint, we see marketing is now spending more money on customer experience. We see that customers are placing premiums on that digital experience. And this is the new normal. And as I had talked about before, if you think about the whole customer journey, marketing is that first touch, especially in a more and more digital world. So it's really incumbent upon marketing to create authentic customer experiences. You just can't be the corporate talking head anymore. Nobody is going to respond to that anymore. The new normal really is being as authentic with customers as you can be. I know that's hard for a lot of CEOs, but that is where the world is moving. We see that marketing is shifting more and more resources to build better customer interfaces. And we see that marketers are very focused on customer retention, more so than they were last year, where they were mostly focused on customer acquisition. And then I think a big part of that will shift in 2021. And I think marketers will be back into the customer acquisition mode. But this year's been all about, let's keep what we have and see if we can't, extend those contracts. We also see that marketers are looking for new ways to engage customers. They're looking at new channels. They're looking at new content formats. And they really are beginning to mix things up and just experiment a lot to see what this more digital than ever before customer, will actually respond to. And that's good for sales, because sales, again, has been slightly disintermediated from their customer, because, again, during the pandemic, no face-to-face, no dinner meetings, no meeting for drinks, all those things are pretty much, out the door. So, again, a lot of that responsibility to at least begin or at least keep some of that relationship really has fallen upon marketing. And so I think that this whole idea of get authentic or prepare to lose works very well with the notion that, companies who can focus on their customers first are going to be the people, are going to be the companies that win in the digital age. And I think that goes along very nicely with that. So TikTok Savage lesson number 3 for everybody is sales and marketers, get authentic and get your heads out of your egos. That's a very nice way to say it. So let's recap the 3 Savage lessons. Number 1, what you think doesn't matter. It matters what you do. Boredom is a secret weapon. Plan for it. Hair on fire is not good. It is actually counterproductive. And number 3, get authentic or prepare to lose. It is indeed the day of the customer, and the customer wants you to be authentic. So that's my presentation on the 3 Savage takeaways from a TikTok addict. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll also be posting some pre-release material on my new book that's coming out in Q1 next year. It's called From the Back Room to the Boardroom, Earn Your Position Through Strategic Marketing Operations. So again, I hope this has been informative. I hope it's been helpful. I do think that more than ever before, the change in sales and marketing is just tremendous, but I think the glass is half full, and I think that 2021 is going to be the best year ever. So thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure to spend time with you today.